Hi, I'm Ed Sperling. I'm the editor-in-chief of Semiconductor Engineering. I'm over at Arteris with Andy Nightingale. We're going to talk today about challenges in data movement. Andy, one of the big challenges here is we have a lot more data that is moving around these days. AI has produced an enormous amount of data. Plus, you're just getting a lot more data from sensors. You're getting a lot more data that you have to work with in terms of whatever job you're trying to do with your compute. How do we make sure the data gets to the right place at the right time?
As complexity is rising in modern SoC designs, we've got huge data sources and data sinks. So let me show you a bit more detail of how this works.
Andy, what are we looking at?
We're looking at here the fact that the network on chip today in modern SoC designs is really the critical path in terms of data movement. There are thousands of IP blocks now in modern design. There are hundreds of NOCs, so network on chip here actually represents hundreds of these data moving elements that are all linked together in the design.
You also have an entire stack of software up there too, right? You've got the firmware, you've got the middleware, and you've got lots of applications that are running on here. Where did things slow down there?
Yeah, absolutely. So of course, the user interface that we have on our modern devices comes in the application software layer. That relies on the operating system to actually talk to the firmware, and the firmware then actually has to interact with the hardware itself on these critical paths. So really the user experience, the user interface is a key component. So data needs to be moving quickly, and it needs to be moving in a timely manner. So that means the display controller, the GPU, moving the graphics around on the screen has to be snappy, it has to be responsive.
Where does it typically get stuck? What are the problems that you run into?
Yeah, what we get is a contention here where a massive amount of data has to be moved across, say, for a GPU, or somebody presses a button to do some image analysis. They hold their camera up in front of a scene or an object, and they've actually, or even doing some voice translation. So that may invoke some AI. So the AI application loads up, and it starts streaming tons of data in from the sensors, and then the inference engine has to process that. There's a lot of math going on. That invokes accelerators, and all of these components interact, and they're all looking at a path to memory. So we need some level of quality of service that is actually managed through the network interconnects, and we actually set that up to ensure that the quality of service gives the right bandwidth for the devices that need it, the IPs that need it, and it also deals with the latency, such as updating the screen in a timely manner.
We also have a lot of Mac elements that are operating in an AI chip. Those can be accelerators or GPUs or anything else. It's still the same problem of you have a lot of processes going simultaneously. You want that data to end up in exactly the same place at the right time. What's the value here in terms of coherence versus non-coherent type of designs?
Let me show you. So these are examples of multi-die configurations. So if we go back to the previous diagram for a second in terms of that image, the NOC is still the critical path. But what we've done here, we've actually scaled up and scaled out the designs, and we have non-coherent paths and we have coherent paths in the chiplets. Now, commonly, these can actually be mixed together, and these will have to work together. I've separated them out in this context just to show you that the non-coherent configurations of multi-dies is up and running today. It's much more difficult to do cache coherency across multi-dies today, but we can actually achieve that.
How do you do that? I mean, what benefits do you get from that as well?
Yeah, I mentioned about scaling up and scaling out. So as we scale out the non-coherent dies, and we have one die talking to another, it's more or less a fire or forget. The massive amount of data that goes from die A to a copy of die A actually goes out, and there doesn't need to be any particular synchronization of caches or anything going on there. However, in a cache coherent system, in order to actually scale out the cache coherency, we have to be very careful about how we actually synchronize the caches between the dies, and this is a difficult thing to do.
Really what you're doing is you're splitting your workload, right?
Yeah, what we're doing is we're sharing the workload perhaps between a CPU cluster that's running an operating system, and it's actually farming out a task to something like an accelerator.
And so, what the benefit of that? Is it lower power? Is it much faster, or is it just easier to keep track of what you're doing?
The reason that we'd actually disaggregate or scale out and have an accelerator separate from a CPU cluster is that we can actually keep the CPU cluster on a current or an advanced process node actually running, taking advantage of the low power that that gives you, say 2-3 nanometer nodes. On the accelerator, especially if it's got a specific task or it's a SRAM based, for example, or even has some high voltage IOs on it, that can actually be used in a slightly earlier process node that's basically mature but specific for that task. And we don't have to then mix the dies. We don't have to constrain the CPU cluster running in its efficient node with the other die that's actually running, again, in its own way in efficiency, but it has its own constraints, its own power constraints and its own performance constraints. And we can actually separate that out, but still have the data flowing conveniently between the two.
What happens when you have uneven rates of processing in each one of these? So, for example, you may have aging that's going on or a latent defect that shows up years later. How does that impact what you're doing here?
Well, what we can do here, because the dies are actually separated out, there's certainly handshaking going on between them. There's coordination going on between them. That handshaking is obviously handled between the two. But because we've got different dies, we can actually upgrade one or the other at a different rate. So if there's an error or an issue or problems you have with a particular die, that can be upgraded independently. The first die can, all the software, it remains unchanged, the functionality remains unchanged. All you're doing is you're just changing that connection interface. So that actually saves time to market when you're doing derivative or upgraded designs.
This whole industry is in motion. Everything is now in flux. Standards are being developed, but they are not complete at this point. What impact does that have, and do we really have to wait for all these standards in order to be able to leverage what we have?
Yeah, I mean, standards are good. We rely on standards, on de facto standards. We talk about the Amber Bus standard as being the de facto one for the industry, and that's very mature. Everyone uses it, and it's a great standard to actually use for intercommunication for chiplets. But these standards are still evolving. The chiplet standard itself especially is actually evolving, so we don't have to sit and wait. We can actually be very pragmatic, and we can start to develop multi-die communications between chiplets as long as we actually use a known device at one side and the other. We plug them together, we test them together. The standards will evolve and they will adopt the standards as it goes forward to make that job easier. But being pragmatic today, there are ways that we can actually plug multi-dies together without the standards to be fully matured. So that's not a blocker for us.
Another issue is that a lot of these designs are one-offs. They're very customized, and the workloads may change within those designs. How does that affect what you've already put together here? Can this design adapt to whatever the workload is going to be?
Yeah, I think that the fact that we're going multi-die now actually opens that scope up to more adaptability rather than less. And that means that for one die you have a particular application that runs a particular performance rate with particular software running on it. On the other die, if you've got an accelerator that you've actually passed off, the information actually going to that second die is effectively partitioned in a way that you can replace or plug in that second die. The performance can be better, it can be lower power. The first die is just talking in the same way as it always had. The software is running in the same way as it always has. And it's almost like having a graphics, back in the day when we all had PCs and plug-in cards. You take your graphics card, you basically insert a new, faster performance, more memory graphics card that's more capable. Maybe update the driver on the host system, but actually you've actually swapped in a new piece of hardware. So for multi-die designs for new chiplets, The derivative is you can actually replace that new hardware in the next spin by just replacing one of these dies and keeping the rest of the system the same. Again, analogous to keeping your PC motherboard the same with all its other peripherals and cards, and actually swapping in and out the graphics card.
So time to market is radically reduced.
Absolutely.
One other piece that changes here is the flow, right? Because now you have a lot more elements that have to be put into that flow and considered as you're developing it. How does that all work here?
Yeah. Well, effectively what we're doing is we're actually condensing that flow in some respects to each individual die. We also have to expand it then in some respects as well to actually have a verification flow that works across dies. So in some ways we have conventionality where you basically execute your normal design flow, your architecture, your implementation, and your validation. And then you've got that multi-die interface that you have to validate, and the flow will actually also execute in the same way for if it's a new die. If it's the same die and you're plugging back to back, then the validation happens between the two dies. If it's a new die that you're adding in, of course, that will have its own flow. It will have architecture, implementation, validation. But the crucial points here in terms of the flow, what's changing is that that inter-chip validation has to actually layer on top of that. So one SOC is validated, the other SOC is validated, but the crucial thing in the middle here is the connection interface. The specification between the two has to be understood. The workloads have to be pushed between the two. The things like memory map, that has to be considered across dies now. The registers, of course, for configuration of the different die, that has to be known and managed and validated. So what we're really doing is, as we're scaling out the design, we have to also scale up the verification process. So really what's changing in the flow is we have a top level flow, if you like, that's working on top of those bottom level flows. And as we have more dies that come into the mix, as you would expect, we have the flow that we saw in the previous diagram executing on each one, and then we have to have again that high level flow on top that actually has to consider all of the different combinations of the devices and actually validate that pattern, those patterns.
And when we think about flows, we typically in the past would look at this from a timeline going from left to right, but really what's happened is a lot of this has shifted left and you now have a flow that's almost like a stack, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point to actually mention. So in order to actually get ahead and actually de-risk the entire process, what we're talking about here is actually having to do a shift left in terms of the verification. So this means having a digital twin, if you like, of each individual die that you can actually embody and connect up, say in a System C world, in images of the different dies here that we've shifted left before we get to the implementation. So yeah, good point in terms of bringing that one up.
Andy Nightingale, thanks for a great explanation.
Thank you.